Have you ever stopped to wonder why? Despite all the modern medical advancements and the low-fat labels filling our grocery aisles, we seem to be getting sicker, more tired, and more inflamed than the generation that came before us. Could it be that the very heart-healthy oils sitting in your pantry right now, the ones the experts told you to switch 2 decades ago, are actually the silent culprits behind that nagging joint pain, the persistent brain fog, or the stubborn weight that won't budge as you cross into your 40s and 50s? What if I told you that for the last 60 years, we've been part of a massive, unmonitored experiment that traded the robust health of our grandparents for a cheap, industrial liquid that was never meant for human consumption? It's a terrifying thought that by trying to do the right thing for your cholesterol, you might have been fueling a fire of systemic inflammation that is aging your body from the inside out. We see the rising rates of heart disease and metabolic issues, and we're told it's just a part of getting older. But is it possible that we've simply been starved of the essential stable fats our cells actually need to repair themselves? Tonight, when you stand in your kitchen to prepare dinner, you face a choice that is far more significant than just flavor. It is a choice between continuing a dangerous industrial trend or returning to a forgotten wisdom that kept previous generations strong well into their 90s. We are going to peel back the label on those clear plastic bottles of vegetable oil and look at the dark truth of how they are manufactured. Because once you understand what these liquids do to your arteries when they hit high heat, you'll realize that the safe choice was actually the biggest risk of all. We're standing at a crossroads of health and heritage, and it's time to ask the question that the big food conglomerates hope you never investigate. Are you protecting your heart, or are you slowly poisoning it? If these oils are as damaging as the data now suggests, you have to ask yourself, how did they end up in nearly every processed food and home kitchen in the Western world? It wasn't a medical breakthrough that cleared the way. It was a masterclass in corporate marketing, and a very timely, very lucrative deception. Think back to the early 1900s. Your great-grandparents didn't have bottles of golden vegetable oil. They had crocks of lard and tins of tallow. But a massive shift occurred when industrial giants realized they could take the leftovers of the cotton and soybean industries, chemically bleach and deodorize them, and sell them as purity in a bottle. They didn't just sell a product, they sold a fear, specifically the fear of saturated fat. By the time the 1950s rolled around, a few influential, yet deeply flawed, nutritional studies were cherry-picked to convince a panicked public that the animal fats humans had thrived on for millennia were suddenly the enemy of the heart. It was a convenient narrative for an industry that could produce seed oils for pennies and sell them for dollars. While the traditional nutrient-dense fats were pushed to the shadows, this wasn't just a change in recipes. It was a systematic erasure of ancestral knowledge, leaving us as the first generation to deal with the fallout of a diet built on industrial lubricants rather than real food. You've likely felt that nagging suspicion that the official advice hasn't made us any healthier. And as we look at the timeline of when these oils entered our bloodstreams compared to when chronic illness skyrocketed, the coincidence becomes impossible to ignore. We were promised a heart-healthy revolution, but as we look at the state of our vitality today, it's clear we were sold a bill of goods. And now we're going to look at the first real alternative that can help you reclaim what was lost, now that the veil has been lifted on industrial oils. We have to look at what was stolen from our kitchens, starting with what many chefs and health researchers are now calling liquid gold, beef tallow. If the word tallow sounds like something out of a Victorian novel, that's because it was the backbone of human health for centuries before the factory age. Tallow is rendered fat specifically from cattle, and it is a biological powerhouse that looks more like your own cell membranes than any seed oil ever could. For those of us over 35, the real magic lies in its stability. Unlike vegetable oils that oxidize and turn rancid the moment they face the heat of your stove, tallow is rugged. It stays chemically intact, meaning you aren't ingesting oxidative stress that accelerates the wrinkling of your skin or the stiffening of your joints. But the benefits go deeper than just heat resistance. Tallow is naturally packed with fat-soluble vitamins A, D, K, and E along with conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, which has been studied for its ability to help the body maintain lean muscle mass while burning stored fat. Imagine the irony. We were told to avoid this fat to stay thin. Yet it contains the very compounds that support a healthy metabolism as it naturally slows down with age. When you cook a steak or roast vegetables in tallow, you aren't just adding flavor. You are providing your brain with the high-quality cholesterol it needs to maintain cognitive function and hormonal balance. You might remember the distinct rich taste of fries or crusts from your childhood that wasn't just flavor. That was the satisfaction of a body finally getting the dense nutrients it craves. But as impressive as tallow is, it's only half of the story, because there is another traditional fat that has been even more unfairly maligned. And it might be the missing piece to your nutritional puzzle. If tallow is the golden standard, then lard is undoubtedly the most misunderstood. Essential in the history of the human diet, for decades, the word lard has been used as a punchline or an insult, a synonym for poor health and clogged arteries. But once you look at the actual biochemistry, the reality is nothing short of shocking. While tallow is celebrated for its rugged stability, high-quality lard specifically, when sourced from pasture-raised pigs, is one of the most significant sources of vitamin D on the entire planet. As we age, our ability to synthesize vitamin D from the sun decreases, and our bone density and immune resilience become top priorities. Yet, here is a natural whole food source that was scrubbed from our menus in favor of synthetic supplements. Lard is unique because it is unsaturated, containing high levels of oleic acid, the very same heart-healthy fat found in olive oil, but without the fragility that makes olive oil risky for high-heat cooking. It provides a creamy, neutral richness that tallow simply can't match, making it the secret to the flaky crusts and tender meats our grandmothers were famous for. But there's a catch that most people miss, and it's a dangerous one. The lard you see on most grocery store shelves today is often hydrogenated and treated with the same chemicals as the seed oils we're trying to escape. This creates a terrifying trust gap for the consumer. If you buy the wrong kind, you're right back where you started, fueling inflammation instead of fighting it. We have to distinguish between the industrial byproduct and the traditional superfood, because while one is a recipe for metabolic disaster, the other is a vital tool for cellular repair and hormonal health. But how do these two ancient titans actually handle the fire? Because the moment you turn on your stove, a chemical reaction begins that determines whether your meal is nourishing your body or scarring your internal lining. This brings us to the most dangerous misunderstanding in the modern kitchen, the smoke point trap. We've been conditioned to look at the back of an oil bottle and search for a high smoke point, believing that as long as the oil isn't smoking, it's safe to consume. But for the health-conscious senior, this is a deadly oversimplification. The real danger isn't just when an oil starts to smoke. It's when it begins to oxidize, a process where the chemical structure of the oil breaks down and creates toxic compounds called polarized polymers. Vegetable oils like canola, soy, and corn are loaded with polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are incredibly fragile. When these oils are heated, they essentially shatter at a molecular level, turning your dinner into a delivery system for free radicals that attack your arterial walls and trigger systemic inflammation. Think of it like this. Your arteries are like the plumbing in your home, and these oxidized oils are like pouring liquid sandpaper through the pipes. Animal fats, like tallow and lard, however, are composed of saturated and monounsaturated bonds that are built to withstand the heat. They are like a reinforced shield. They don't break, they don't shatter, and they don't create the toxic byproducts that lead to the very heart health scares we've been told to fear. When you see that heart-healthy label on a bottle of clear oil, they aren't telling you what happens to that liquid the moment it touches a hot pan. You aren't just cooking food, you are conducting a chemical experiment in your kitchen every single night. The question is, are you producing a meal that heals your cells, or one that's leaving behind a trail of biological debris? So, now that we understand the chemical battlefield of your frying pan, the question becomes practical. Which one wins a permanent spot on your counter? When we put tallow and lard head to head, we aren't just comparing calories, we are choosing the right tool for your specific health goals. If your primary concern is absolute stability and fat-burning potential, tallow is your undisputed champion. Its high concentration of stearic acid has been shown to actually signal your mitochondria to turn on potentially, boosting a sluggish metabolism that often feels like an inevitable part of aging. It's the heavy hitter for searing a steak or roasting hearty root vegetables, providing a savory depth that makes a meal feel truly satisfying, which prevents those late-night sugar cravings that sabotage our health. On the other hand, lard is the versatile artisan. If you're looking to support your immune system and bone health through natural vitamin D, or if you want a neutral fat for delicate baking and everyday sautéing, lard is the winner. It's softer, easier to scoop, and mimics the heart-healthy profile of olive oil, but with a much higher tolerance for your stove's heat. For the 35-plus crowd, the hidden victory here is satiety. These animal fats trigger the hormones that tell your brain you are full and nourished. Something vegetable oils, which are often processed with neurotoxic hexane, simply cannot do. Choosing between them isn't about finding a perfect fat. It's about rotating them to ensure your body gets a full spectrum of fat-soluble nutrients. However, there is a massive red flag you need to be aware of before you head to the store, because if you aren't careful, you might walk out with a product that is just a wolf in sheep's clothing, hiding the same industrial poisons we're trying to escape. This is where the excitement of rediscovering these traditional fats hits a dangerous wall of modern reality. You might be tempted to head to the baking aisle of your local supermarket and grab the first blue and white tub labeled lard. But I need you to stop and look closer, because this is the ultimate sourcing minefield. In a desperate bid to compete with the long shelf life of industrial seed oils, many commercial producers have begun hydrogenating their lard and tallow. This is a chemical process that forces hydrogen atoms into the fat to make it shelf-stable at room temperature. But it creates the one thing every doctor agrees is a disaster for your health: trans fats. By trying to return to a natural way of eating, you could inadvertently be buying a product that is even more inflammatory than the vegetable oil you just threw away. For our generation, the stakes are too high to play guessing games with labels. You must become a detective. If that tub of lard doesn't say unprocessed or non-hydrogenated, and if it isn't kept in the refrigerated section, it has likely been treated with the same deodorizers and preservatives that characterize the Frankenoils we are trying to avoid. The gold standard, the only kind that will actually deliver the vitamin D and the metabolic boost we've discussed, is leaf lard or suet tallow from pasture-raised grass-fed animals. When an animal lives in the sun and eats its natural diet, it stores those nutrients in its fat. When an animal is raised in a cramped industrial lot, it stores toxins and pesticides instead. It's a sobering realization. You cannot find true health in a shortcut. Buying the wrong fat is just continuing the cycle of the last 60 years. But finding the right source is like finding a fountain of youth for your cells. It's the difference between merely greasing the pan and actually fortifying your biological systems for the decades ahead. So, how do we bring this all together without feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the modern food system? Ultimately, stepping away from the clear plastic bottles of the industrial age is about more than just a kitchen upgrade. It is a profound act of reclaiming your heritage and your health. When you choose to cook with tallow or lard, you are stepping back into a lineage of strength that understood something we've spent 60 years trying to forget: that nature doesn't make mistakes, but factories do. Think of the Castrian skillet passed down through your family. It wasn't seasoned with soybean oil. It was built on the back of animal fats that provided the very foundation for the vitality of our ancestors. As we move through our 40s, 50s, and beyond, our bodies stop forgiving the cheap shortcuts. We can no longer afford the systemic inflammation and the hormonal disruption that comes with a diet built on industrial lubricants. By returning to these stable, nutrient-dense fats, you are giving your heart the protection it was promised, your brain the fuel it requires for clarity, and your body the fat-soluble vitamins it needs to stay resilient against the passing years. This is your opportunity to break the cycle of the Great Deception and start a new legacy in your own home, one where food is once again a source of life rather than a source of hidden fear. It might feel strange at first to reach for a jar of tallow instead of a bottle of canola, but your cells will recognize the difference almost instantly. You aren't just changing a recipe. You are honoring the biological blueprint that has kept humans thriving for millennia. The modern world told us to fear the very things that made us strong. But now that you know the truth about the smoke point trap and the power of ancestral fats, you hold the key to a level of vitality that most people your age think is impossible. It's time to clear out the pantry, light the stove, and cook with the confidence that you are finally nourishing the legacy you've worked so hard to build.